Payback by R.C. Bridgestock, read by Sarah Durham. Joe Bridgestock, 1920 to 1980. Irene Bridgestock, née Johnson, 1929 to 1990. Raymond Jordan, 1937 to 2020. To Mum Betty Jordan, née Thomas, and all our family who lived with us through the real crime and supporters in fiction. For law enforcement officers, the true heroes, who strive for justice for victims and their families. Chapter 1. For Detective Inspector Charley Mann and her team, the months following the capture of one of Britain's most wanted murderers, Titus Deaver, the cannibalistic killer, were tough. Titus was known to brutally slaughter his victims and then eat parts of their bodies. There had been numerous victims, including that of their colleague, undercover cop Karen Eales, whose body parts were found in Deaver's freezer. It had been a devastating and protracted inquiry, demanding immense professional and emotional involvement, and Charley and a number of colleagues had risked their lives to save others. Yet all witnesses involved had, to their credit, stood up and testified in court. Now Charley sat quietly with her thoughts as stillness descended on the public lounge. It was home to 7 brown wooden doors, which led into the 7 courtrooms which occupied the 3rd floor of the Italianate brick building of the Crown Court in London. She was waiting for the jury of 12 to return their verdict. For 5 lengthy days she had stared at the same white walls, the blue carpet, the 35 black chairs in the bland waiting room that she decided could have been any waiting room in any building, apart from the toing and froing of a constant stream of traffic of lawyers in gowns and wigs, often with their errant clients in tow. When peace descended on the waiting area, it was not for long, and the reassuring sound of the air conditioning that accompanied it was a welcome one, as it was the warm month of August. For the most part, Charley sat resting her head against the wall, avoiding eye contact with those around her. She stared up at the rows of bright lights in the ceiling, because there was nothing else to do, other than read the notice board, which consisted of nothing more than health and safety posters or court listings. However, despite appearances, Charley's focus remained keenly trained on the brown door that led into Court 4. Suddenly, the mood in the room changed when a tannoy announcement stated that a defendant was required immediately in Court 6, just as the door to Court 7 flew open and an outpouring of 50 people from the public gallery emerged, jostling each other to get through the door. The press reporters sought a quiet place to send an update on the proceedings to their newsrooms. There were some of opposing sides who were bullish, provoking an altercation. Charley braced herself to intervene, but before she could do so, 4 uniformed officers moved in, and all became still once more as the crowd settled down again to wait for proceedings to recommence. Some people nervously walked the floor, others stretched their arms and legs and flexed their stiff fingers. One man lay down on the floor, put his coat under his head and closed his eyes. Each eyed the next person with suspicion, until it was possible to ascertain who was friend or foe, and on the wrong or right side of the law. Criminals didn't come with a dress code. Amongst the crowd, the victims' families, whom Detective Sergeant Charley Mann represented in a supportive role, remained dignified. Often they broke into prayer for their ordeal to end in the conviction of the offender, although intimidation from the perpetrator's friends was rampant in the waiting lounge. Charley could also sense the nerves amongst her colleagues and the witnesses. Their anxiety was tangible. No one wanted to let the side down. Everyone was well aware that the job of the defence in representing their client was to try and drive a wedge into the prosecution's case. The truth was that the attendant circumstances of the murders leading up to the trial had affected Charley deeply, and the fact that her secondment in London was coming to an end and she was returning to West Yorkshire on promotion to Detective Inspector brought about a relief like no other. She wanted to be far gone from the station where the officers found their colleagues' deaths so hard to deal with. With very little fanfare, The tannoy conveyed the important call to reassemble the court. The verdict was in. The court usher opened the door to courtroom 4. Charley stood, preparing to ride on a wave of people flooding in. It seemed that every pained pair of eyes that met hers begged the same: please let him get the sentence he deserves. Titus Deaver walked up the 18 steps into the glass-screened dock for the last time. The summing up done, the judge read out the impact statement of the family. Despite his experience, his voice was hesitant at times, his emotion raw, whilst tears flowed openly in the gallery. As he closed, the judge asked the foreman to stand. Charley felt the hand of her colleague grip the back of her chair, and it was obvious to her he had dipped his head in prayer. The court usher began reading out the charges to the jury foreman. Listening to the usher's voice, Charley felt the warm quickness of her colleague's breath on her neck, pleading with our Lord to do the victims and their families justice. Waiting for the reply from the jury, every breath of air was sucked from the court by the crowd, as the foreman's forthright tone bounced off the 4 walls. Guilty! 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 Titus Deaver was sentenced to life imprisonment. As his sentence was read out, he showed no remorse, nor was he moved by his fate. Flanked by 2 prison officers, he was taken away. The judge then moved on to commend those involved in the investigation. Detective Sergeant Charley Mann was given a special mention for the discovery of the left luggage ticket tucked down the spine of a Bible in Deaver's possession, a vital piece of evidence which had marked the start of Deaver's downfall. As the judge concluded his summing up and sentencing, like many others in the packed, overheated courtroom, Charley felt the desperate need to leave, to get away from the case and all its gruesome details. She finally exited with the crowd through the wooden door, feeling sick at heart, the fresh air rushing in as fast as the attending media rushed out to catch the press deadline. She determined she would put the skills now acquired during her secondment in the capital to good use. The trial had lasted a gruelling 42 days. It was time to go home. Charley knew almost nothing about the woman who had married her childhood sweetheart so soon after Charley's departure, except what she'd seen about her on Facebook. When the woman's pictures started constantly showing sunnier climes, Charley guessed that the happy couple had emigrated to start a new life. She was relieved that she was going to be transferred home to her old patch in West Yorkshire. What was odd, though, was that Charley's ex himself was conspicuous by his absence on social media. It was especially puzzling given that his line of work normally required its considerable use. She couldn't remember ever not having trusted Danny. Older than her, with her grandparents living on the neighbouring farm where she spent most weekends and school holidays, he had taught her to climb trees and hurdle walls. He had soothed her when she had tumbled. It was Danny who'd shielded her eyes when his father had drowned the injured farm cat who was about to have kittens. Danny who'd wiped her tears when lambs were stillborn. Danny who'd disposed of the bodies of the dead animals they came across in the woods with respect and decency, always noting the place with a handmade wooden cross, sometimes made from lollipop sticks. They'd tickled trout together in the river, and he'd shown her how to gut the fish so they could be cooked and eaten on the campfires he had built. Living alone with his dad on the farm after his mother had left for another had taught Danny self-sufficiency at a very young age. Danny had never failed her while she was growing up, especially when she reached her teenage years. Charley remembered how one day he had appeared out of nowhere like an avenging angel to deal with Colin Jenkins, who had lured her unsuspecting behind the bike shed. When struggling and screaming, Danny found Colin refusing to release her without a kiss. She'd watched in awe as he dragged the would-be Casanova to his feet and beat the much larger boy until he ran off snivelling. Danny Ray had been her safe pair of hands. He'd played the clown at school, but to her he was a protector. He had an innate ability to soothe her, assuring her he would always be there, and he always had been. When Danny had got a paper round at 15, he'd saved for a whole year to buy her a season ticket for his beloved Huddersfield Town Football Club, so she could go with him. She went as often as she could.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?